like I said, light conversation.
And was Nikki drinking at that time?
Yes.
Did she seem drunk to you?
I didn't think that she seemed overly drunk. I mean, she had a couple drinks, as did I, so, but she didn't seem like she was slurring terribly, or, she wasn't stumbling or anything like that.
And was she, from what you could tell, happy this whole time she was talking with you?
Yeah, I mean, she seemed upbeat, but I mean, that was kind of how she was normally. Like I said, she was always a very outgoing and outspoken person, so she seemed in good mood.
So she didn't seem angry at all?
No, not to me.
Did she say anything in your conversation that was unusual for your normal conversations?
The only thing that stood out for me was she had mentioned that she would get in trouble by talking with me. And it wasn't me specifically, it was just like if she was talking to another guy. But I just kind of played it off as typical jealousy, most boyfriends, girlfriends have that type of thing.
Okay.
So.
How long did you end up talking with Nikki that night?
I would say probably 20 minutes, half hour, something like that. We basically just, like I said, we caught up a little bit, had a shot together, and that was kind of the whole thing.
And then eventually you left?
Yes, we left, I want to say around 1:30. It was before bar close that we left.
And then eventually you went along your way, I imagine? You went
Yeah.
home?
Yep.
And then sometime later, were you made aware on the news of what happened to Nikki?
Yes. There was someone in her group that actually came up before we had left and asked if I had seen her, and I hadn't. I saw her walk away, and that was the last I had really seen of her.
And then a couple weeks later, you decided you had to go make a statement to police?
I was actually kind of tracked down.
Okay.
So
they found you?
Yes. I wasn't sure if I didn't feel like I had anything that I needed to, bring in, but they wanted to talk with me, so that was fine. But yeah, I found out a few days later that something had happened, so.
Was Nikki ever with her boyfriend in the bar, from what you could tell?
From our transaction, or our conversation, basically, it made it seem like she was out with her boyfriend's friends, but he was not with. So. Okay.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. You said you had 5 drinks when you got to the sardine can. Did you continue to drink when you got to the sardine can then?
Yeah, I had a shot with her, and then I had probably 1, maybe 2 drinks there.
Okay, so total of maybe 6 or 7 throughout that night?
Throughout the night, yeah.
Okay. And with respect to the statement that Nikki told you, what was her demeanor like when she told you that statement about she might get in trouble?
It didn't seem like she was panicked or anything like that. It was, like I said, I'd kind of just shrugged it off as a typical, like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm talking with another guy or something like that. She didn't seem like she was distressed or trying to portray anything.
She didn't seem very concerned at that point?
Not terribly, no. I mean, like I said, maybe it was a nervous laughter or something that she did. I don't know. I didn't pick up on it. But she kind of said that and then just had laughed it off.
Okay. And you stated that, for the most part, Nikki seemed happy during your interaction with her at the sardine can?
Yeah. I mean, usually when we would see each other out, we'd kind of talk for a little while and hang out and just have a good time. And so it was kind of the same thing that I'm used to whenever I run into her.
And you were with Nikki for about 20 or 30 minutes on that night?
Yeah, just we were talking at the bar.
And that was the sum total of your interaction with her on that night?
Yes.
And do you know who her boyfriend was at that point?
I didn't, no. I've become aware since then, but I had never met him.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Briefly, so when you talked about Nikki's demeanor when she told you, when she mentioned getting in trouble for talking with you, she wasn't panicked, but it also didn't fit the conversation either, correct?
It stuck out, you know, so, I mean, I guess maybe it was a little off kilter. But like I said, at the time, I didn't really think much of it, but it definitely did stick out in my mind.
And that's why you made sure you told police about it when they came and talked to you?
Yeah.
And you obviously didn't provide every single thing you talked to Nikki about in your statement?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, at this point, I don't remember almost anything specific of what we talked about besides the typical, like, hey, how you doing, how's it been, that type of stuff, but that did stick out.
Nothing further, Judge.
Any recross at all?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Lemons, thank you. You may step down. And you are your next witness?
The defense would call Dallas Kennedy.
Alice, if you come back up here again to the witness stand, Jody will swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your full name and spell your last.
Dallas Kennedy, Kennedy.
Thank you. Dallas, thanks for coming back and testifying. So I know you talked a lot last time you were in court, and we don't want to just repeat all of that. So just to refresh everyone's memory, how do you know Nicole?
Mutual friend, and then we used to work together.
And did you get to know Dylan as well?
Yes, I used to babysit for him.
How many times did you babysit for him?
Maybe about 2 months, a few times a week.
And then were you asked to babysit Dylan on the night of May 20th, morning of May 21st?
Yes,
And you did that?
I did.
And then sometime in the morning of May 21st, Doug and Greg returned home?
Yes,
And then eventually they left, correct?
Greg left, not Doug.
Greg left.
Yes.
And then you eventually returned home?
Yes,
And you were aware that Nikki didn't return home, correct?
yes.
And how did you know that?
She didn't come back with them when they came home at bar close. Her phone was off when I went to call her. She just wasn't around at that time.
And were you trying to get a hold of her?
I called a few times, yes.
Did you try to talk to anybody else about getting a hold of her?
The next morning, I contacted her sister, I contacted Doug, and that was it.
Did you stay in contact with Doug about what happened to Nikki?
A few times throughout that day, sporadically, not like in close contact. Along with her sister, we messaged a few times the very next day.
Did you ever find out what did ultimately happen to Nikki?
Eventually, I would say 2 days after it all happened.
And what kind of emotional state were you in?
I was in the investigator's office. It was about midnight. I got my phone back and everything started coming through on my phone. And I think I went into complete shock.
And what'd you do next?
I sat there shaking profusely and crying, and then was escorted to a friend's house.
Did you have contact with Doug Dietrich after that?
He called me the next morning.
And when he called you, what was the nature of that conversation?
First he reached out via Facebook Messenger asking if I could call him. I then returned with my phone number, and he called me back probably 5 to 7 minutes later, basically telling me that he was...
Detail with respect to conversations.
Attorney Sugar?
I think that she's allowed to define the nature of what they were talking about.
It's called hearsay, Your Honor.
Sounds like hearsay, and I haven't heard any exception to the hearsay rule at this point. I don't know what she's going to testify to, but anything Dietrich told her would be hearsay.
Well, one of the next things, Judge, is hearsay, one of the things that we're trying to drive at, and ultimately it's getting at inconsistent statements that Doug Dietrich himself made earlier in this trial. So that's the hearsay argument, not for these very specific things that will lead up to that, but
Your Honor, the court knows how one properly asks a question to a witness if there's been a statement made that someone else has indicated was not made. That's the format that one follows, not just what was said. So I understand that there may be pursuance of that type of questioning, but we need to get to that then.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection. You may try to restate the question, Attorney Schuchert.
sure. Dallas, did you eventually question Doug about what happened to Nicole?
Let me just ask on what date.
When was this conversation with Doug, if you
I
remember?
believe it was the 22nd of May, just kind of going over that we were both in the investigator's office, and he basically had stated that that was her body that they had found and that she had passed. And basically in conversation, I just asked, what happened? You know, like, what happened? And he just replied, I don't know, she hit her head and then she just wanted to walk home. She just wanted to walk home. Just in a conversation. It was just conversation between two people of just in shock. I asked if he was with family and that he should just be with his family right now, and if he needed anything, reach out later, but kind of grieve with your family.
So specifically, when you had asked him what happened, he said, I don't know, she hit her head, correct?
It came out of his mouth, that comment. I don't know what that meant, but it came out of his mouth.
And then what did you do?
It was just kind of silent, just taking everything all in. The conversation was short. It was pretty much ended after that. I think he just wanted to let me know that they found out the news that she's no longer with them. So.
When you were babysitting Dylan and when Doug and you were the only two people in the house, Doug asked to smoke weed, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I ask you not put in hearsay with respect to what Doug stated, and this is his witness, he can't lead.
Well, this has already been presented to the jury. You're right, but I'll assume Attorney Schuchert is not being offered now as the truth of the matter asserted, but simply foundational to your next line of questioning. I'll overrule the objection. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then what happened?
He proceeded to just take a hit, and conversation happened.
What did you do next then?
I was just trying to get out of the house, just gather my things and walk towards the door.
And what were you feeling at that time?
Objection, materiality.
Relevancy?
That's what was happening at that time.
Can we approach, Your Honor?
Okay, our sidebar was just in terms of continuing the testimony properly. Attorney Schuchert, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm going to sustain that last objection, so.
And Dallas, why did you decide to leave?
Because Nicole didn't come home, I didn't feel comfortable being there with her not being there, and I just wanted to get back, just wanted to get out of there.
And when you left, did you drive there?
Yes.
So what did you do then?
I got into my car, locked the doors, just kind of looked around the cul-de-sac a little bit.
Why did you lock your doors?
I was just scared, I didn't think he would do anything, I was just scared. I don't know. Everything just seemed so odd in the evening.
It's a strange feeling.
Yeah, just wanted to go home.
And I believe you've testified to this previously. When you left, do you remember, was the garage door up or down?
It was open.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. You had been out on Friday, May 20th of 2016 in the morning, you came over to the house, is that correct?
Correct.
And is it correct you had breakfast with Nikki?
Yes.
And that breakfast took place at her home, is that right?
Yes.
So you were at Berkeley, did you drive over on that occasion?
Yes.
And when you drove over, you observed her car was parked in the garage, is that correct?
Yes.
And am I correct that the two of you then did some rummage sale shopping?
Yes.
Did you drive to that or did you walk around?
It was just in her neighborhood in the cul-de-sac area, so we just stayed there.
Okay. Was your vehicle in the driveway at that point in time?
Yes, on the left side of the driveway.
And how long would you say that you went rummage sale shopping?
I think we were together for maybe about 2.5 hours.
And is it correct at about 11 a.m. you were done and you returned to your vehicle?
Roughly, yes.
And did you leave at that point in time?
Shortly after, yes.
And Nikki went in to take a shower, is that right?
Yes.
Were you driving a silver Chevrolet Equinox at that point in time?
Yes.
But this was on Friday, May 20th at roughly 11 a.m. that you left, is that right?
Yes.
And that would be the morning when you finished the rummage sale shopping?
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Step down or excuse. Your next witness?
The defense would call investigator Olmstead to the stand.
Mr. Olmstead, if you come forward, Jody will swear you in.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Nicholas Olmstead, Olmsted.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Olmstead, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Can you tell us how you're employed?
I am a narcotics investigator with the Brown County Drug Task Force.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been a narcotics investigator since January of 2014 and been with Brown County Sheriff's Office since August of 2010.
Do you have any law enforcement experience before then?
Yes.
And what is that?
I worked for the Menominee Tribal Police Department and also for the Algoma Police Department as a patrol officer.
And then do you have any experience before then?
No.
And do you have any training and experience in law enforcement?
Yes.
Or at least can you tell us about some of the training you've been through?
I was initially trained in accordance with the state of Wisconsin for patrol officer certification, and additional training included the basic and advanced narcotics investigation training.
Do you have any training in terms of collecting evidence?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
As a part of the initial law enforcement training provided to be certified through the state, we are given training and then also updated training throughout my career as law enforcement. That includes identifying evidence and further processing, which would be the careful collecting, bagging, and entering into evidence.
Have you ever investigated a homicide?
With this investigation, yes. But prior to this, no.
So this was your first homicide investigation?
Correct.
So then specifically in terms of this investigation, when did you first become involved?
I first became involved on May 21st, 2016.
And did you take part in some sort of briefing?
As a part of the investigation,
Right.
I was, yes,
Was that at the sheriff's office?
yes.
And then eventually, when you were conducting or being part of the investigation, did that continue on May 22nd?
Yes, it did.
And did that take place at 2329 Berkeley Road?
Yes.
Do you know who lives there?
That was identified as the residence of Douglas Dietrich and Nicole Vanderheiden.
And when you searched the Berkeley residence, was that based on consent or through a search warrant?
That search was based on a search warrant.
And when you conducted that search, did you search the garage?
Yes.
And did you notice any vehicles in the garage?
Yes. When the search warrant was executed, I was there and I observed a gray Buick Rendezvous with license plate 364UZR, and that was registered to Nicole.
And it was parked in the east stall?
Correct, and the east stall would be closest to the access door to the residence from the garage.
Were you investigating by yourself at that time, or were you investigating with other officers?
No, there were a number of us in the residence searching.
Was anybody helping you investigate in the garage?
In that particular instance, I know that narcotics investigator Jason Caters was in there along with me, and both he and I had observed a key holder just inside the door on a couple of hooks, and he had located a set of keys, or at least 2 keys, that were for the Buick.
And you saw those keys as well?
Yes.
Did you try to use those keys at all, or did Investigator Caters try to use those keys?
Narcotics investigator Caters, I saw him pick them up and bring them over to the vehicle. He tried both keys in the ignition, both keys fit in the ignition, and at one point he did turn the key forward so as to activate the battery, but not start the vehicle itself or turn on the ignition.
When you were looking in the rendezvous, when you were looking at the rendezvous, was it equipped with electric-powered driver's seat?
Yes, it was. And it was also equipped with memory seating, and I believe it had 2 settings.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so I was aware that vehicles are equipped with such settings, so as you can program the seat and the tilt of the steering wheel to a particular driver. And I remember that after the key was turned forward or activated, the seat was further back in position, and I tested both of the settings, and I don't remember if it was the first setting or second setting, but I do remember pushing one of the buttons, nothing happened, and then the second button I pushed, the seat moved forward.
And what did that make you think?
That the second setting that I pushed, making it move forward, was for someone typically smaller in stature or shorter.
Were you able to pull any DOT records and find out how tall Doug Dietrich was?
Yes, I was aware just through the investigation that Mr. Dietrich was approximately 6 foot 2 inches tall, and Nicole Vanderheiden was much shorter. I believe she was at least 6 to 8 inches shorter than that.
So based on all of your training and experience, it's your opinion that the power memory setting was programmed at that time for a taller person?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't think he has any way of knowing who programmed it, whether it's for Nicole and Doug or for Nicole and her mother, who's much shorter.
I didn't ask who did it, I just asked if it was for a taller person. There was 2 settings.
I'll overrule. It's a lay opinion. The one setting was for a taller person, the other setting was for a shorter person. We're not talking about who those people are, so objection overruled.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So based on your training and experience in your investigation, the seat in the rendezvous, now we're talking about the driver's seat, it was set at that time when you looked at it for a person taller, based on having those 2 different settings.
I mean, I characterize that the setting that it was at was for a person taller than the second setting that I had pushed.
I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Investigator Olmstead, you indicated that there were 2 keys taken from the rack that appeared to fit in the ignition of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then those keys were then retained with the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that to be the case.
So if there were keys left on the rack after you visited the house on the 22nd, they would not have been keys for that vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And you and Detective Caters or Investigator Caters did not actually start or ignite the vehicle on that day, correct?
Correct. We just moved the key forward so that the battery would be turned on, but the ignition itself was not turned on.
No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, briefly. Investigator, can you tell us, could you at least describe those keys a little better? Were they the same exact key, or?
I could not. I physically did not touch them, view them at all. I just know that narcotic investigator Caters had taken a ring with identical keys from inside, and truthfully, I don't recall what they looked like. I believe they were identical, but I can't say for certain.
Outside of this investigation, are you familiar with what's called a valet key?
Yes.
And what's the purpose of a valet key?
I believe it's just a standalone key that would go with a vehicle for maintenance or to have a vehicle valet parked so as not to turn over other keys to anyone outside of anybody you normally trust.
Sure, and so to park the vehicle, essentially the vehicle would have to be running to do that, correct?
I'm sorry?
You said a valet key would be used to park the vehicle, so the valet would take it and move the
Right,
key to park it.
Correct. As far as what I know, that a valet key would start a vehicle so that could be moved.
Nothing further.
Any recross?
Investigator Olmstead, do you have any knowledge or awareness of an idea of a transponder key? A key implanted with a chip that requires that it be programmed?
I'm aware that they exist.
Outside of your area of expertise generally, though?
No.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any other redirect?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Olmstead, thank you. You may step down. Your next witness?
May we approach?
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been informed defense needs just a little time to prepare and make sure they're ready with their next witness. I've been told 10 minutes, so 10-minute break at this time. All right, let's be seated, everyone. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Defense can call their next witness.
The defense would call Roman Ehrenstein.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Sergeant Roman Ehrenstein, A-R-O-N-S-T-E-I-N.
Whenever you're ready, counsel.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Ehrenstein, how are you employed?
I'm employed as a deputy sheriff for the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been in that role?
I've been a deputy sheriff for the Sheriff's Office since 2001.
And did you work in law enforcement before then?
I did.
And who was that with?
I was a military police officer with the United States Army, and I also worked for two smaller municipal agencies in the state of Wisconsin briefly prior to coming to Brown County.
Can you briefly describe any training that you've received in law enforcement?
I can. So I've received, from 2008 to 2013, I was a narcotics investigator for the Brown County Drug Task Force, so I received a number of training involved in drug trafficking and investigations involving death, involving drugs. Since 2008 until from 2013 until the present, I've been a detective with the Brown County Sheriff's Office, so I've received a number of trainings involving financial crimes as well as crimes against persons, sexual assaults, death investigations, those kind of things.
And how many homicide investigations have you taken part in?
Probably a handful.
And then did you specifically, were you part of the investigation into the death of Nicole Vanderheiden?
I had a peripheral role, that is correct.
Can you describe what your role was?
Sure. I was one of a number of detectives that was tasked to conduct canvases for surveillance cameras, conduct interviews of different individuals that were identified in the investigation, as well as assist with searches.
And were any of those specific searches at a residence on Berkeley Road?
At least one was, that's correct.
And who owned that house?
I don't have any personal information on that. I believe through the investigation I learned that the residence was associated with the victim, in this case the decedent, and her live-in boyfriend.
And who was that boyfriend?
It's Douglas Dietrich, I believe.
And do you remember what time you conducted this search?
I believe the search was on May 24, 2016. I think the search had already initiated prior to my arrival. I arrived a short time after that. In preparation for trial today, I reviewed the log that was kept that day documenting folks that were present at the search warrant, and I believe I was there roughly from 12:30 till 8:30 p.m.
What were officers specifically looking for?
It was a search warrant that was in furtherance of this homicide investigation, and we were looking for any evidence that would assist in either including or exclude any individuals or items that may be related to this investigation.
And then which rooms in this house did you specifically search or help search?
I believe I was present throughout the house.
And did that include the garage?
It did.
Do you remember searching the garage?
I remember being present and searching the garage, that's correct.
Did you find anything of evidentiary value that you noticed?
I do recall that I had identified some wires that were located on top of a refrigerator in the northeast portion of the garage.
If we show you a photo, would you be able to show us where roughly you found those wires?
I can, yes.
Judge, we would ask to republish an older exhibit. It's 136.
136 has already been received. Let's republish it at this time.
So you can see on the projector, that's the garage from what you remember it?
It appears to be accurate. I believe there was a vehicle in the garage at one point in time, and then it was removed.
And there's multiple refrigerators, or maybe one refrigerator and one chest freezer?
I do see that, and I do recall looking in those areas.
And do you remember where specifically, or more specifically, you found the wires?
To the best of my recollection, I believe there was a box on top of the standing refrigerator, and I believe they were in that box. But that's to the best of my recollection.
Were there a lot of wires throughout the house?
I don't recall seeing a lot of wires throughout the house, no.
Why did wires stand out to you as being of evidentiary value?
I believe at this point in time it was made known to investigators that were assisting in the investigation that part of the cause of death involves strangulation, and that there may have been some wires that were located that were believed to be involved in the offense.
Judge, may I approach?
Go ahead.
Detective, I'm handing you what's labeled Exhibit 182. Are those the wires from the garage?
To the best of my recollection, they are, yes.
So when you pointed to specific evidence, you didn't actually collect it yourself, correct?
Not that I can recall. I do recall that there was a substantial amount of staff that were on scene. There were crime response people that were there from the Wisconsin Crime Lab. There were also individuals assigned to documenting things through photographs, such as the one that we saw. And then we also had an evidence custodian that was assigned to specifically collect items of what was believed to be evidentiary value.
And then specifically with these wires, can you just tell us what color are they?
They appear to be blue, white, and black in color.
And then is it fair to say, do you remember that the first set of 3 was in a bundle and the second set of 3 was in a bundle?
To be fair, like I indicated earlier, I would have had a very brief interaction with these items, and then I would have pointed them out to others, and then I would have moved on, continuing with the search. I recall having examined those earlier with the defense counsel, and I do recall them to be in bundles. I have no reason to believe that they were in any other state at the time that they were located.
And with the first set of wires, did you measure them? Or did you observe a tape measure?
I observed the measurements conducted earlier today.
And roughly with that first set, do you remember how long they were?
All three of them were roughly between 36 to 37 inches.
And then do you remember, are they coated with something on the outside, those colors? Is that a rubber or latex coating?
I don't know what kind of material it is, but they do appear to be coated with a material that exhibits the colors that I earlier described.
And then is there an internal wire that you can see at the ends of those wires?
There appears to be, yes.
And what color are those for the first bundle?
They appear to be silver in color. And that would be the bundle that's currently wrapped in a rubber band type of a material or a string.
Sure. And then the second bundle, do you remember how long those were?
I believe I observed the measurements earlier today to be all between 40 to 42 inches approximately.
And they have those same outer coatings?
They do have the outer coatings, correct?
And then the ends of those, where you can see the wires sticking out, what color are those?
They appear to be darker in color, more goldish in color.
Judge, I would move that these items be moved into evidence.
And that's Exhibit 182? Is that correct? Any objection to 182 subject to cross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, 182 is received.
I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor, I would ask that the wires be published to the jury so they can see them.
All right. Any objection to that, Attorney Sugart?
I think the sheriff's office might.
As long as they stay in the bag. I'll just ask that we seal the bag first.
All right, well, why don't we seal the bag, and then along the same lines as a jury was able to have the earlier exhibits containing wire reviewed, that can be published to them at this time. Right to Jody. All right, go ahead, Attorney Lassay. All right. Well, with that publication, any redirect at all?
No.
Sergeant Erskine, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is this witness excused? You're excused, officer, all right? Any other witnesses for today, Attorney Schuchert?
No, Judge, we were going to provide 3 witnesses for today. As we spoke earlier, we ended up providing 5, so we don't have anybody else for today.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that'll conclude testimony for today. There's some other issues we're going to discuss this afternoon. We're on track to get done within the original 2-week calendar. And I just want you to know the last couple of days when we're releasing you early and we're discussing some legal issues, that will lessen the amount of time that there is between the conclusion of the evidence and closing argument. I think this is a better practice. So we'll excuse you for the remainder of today. Again, I admonish you not to discuss this case with anyone or to view any television articles, newspaper articles, and then we'll reconvene tomorrow again at 8:30. I appreciate your patience. Have a good evening.
All right.